Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar by the Global Antibiotic Research and Development Partnership, GARDP. My name is Victor Kwasi, and I'll be hosting today's session on openly accessible resources for the global antimicrobial R&D community. Revive is GARDP's education and outreach program and was officially launched in 2018. It aims to connect and support the antimicrobial R&D community by facilitating learning, sharing knowledge, and connecting people. These webinars are part of our educational activities. All webinars are recorded and can be viewed after the live broadcast on our website, revive.gardp.org/webinars. You'll hear a lot more about Revive from my colleague Astrid Pentz-Murr in today's session. As always, today's presentation will be followed by a Q&A session. You can submit your questions at any time during the webinar via the questions window, as shown on this slide. If your question is specifically directed to one of our speakers today, please do include your name at the beginning of your question. We will address the questions after the presentations and do our best to respond to as many questions as possible. So our moderator today is Katie Prosen. Katie is Senior Associate from the Pew Charitable Trusts and will start us off with a short presentation. Welcome, Katie. I now hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Victor, and thank you to GARDP for the invitation to moderate today. I'm going to share a very brief overview of some of the challenges faced in antibiotic research before moving on to our panelists' presentations. Victor, I don't think I have control over the slides yet. Yeah, now I do. Okay. Many of us have known for a long while that the antibiotic market is unlike other disease areas. This is in part because antibiotics are fairly unique in that they're curative, only typically need to be administered for short durations, and they can lose efficacy the more that they're used. It's just as expensive to develop a new antibiotic as it is for other drugs, and the anticipated return on investment doesn't even come close to covering expenditures. Further compounding these challenges, any new antibiotics that are approved are held in reserve for resistant infections, a critical condition for stewardship, but problematic for companies trying to recoup costs. Luckily, many governments are acknowledging this is a major concern that needs to be addressed and that there's not a single one-size-fits-all solution. That being said, the economic problems aren't the only challenges faced by antibiotics developers and researchers. It turns out it's just really hard to make effective antibiotics that don't also hurt your patient. Since it takes 10 to 15 years to bring a drug to market, you need to successfully predict what the clinically relevant organisms are going to be that far in the future, as well as what drug classes will even continue to be effective at that time. You can almost say all antibiotics approved in the last few decades are Me Too drugs, reimaginings of classes discovered in the 1980s or earlier with only incremental improvements over previous generations. Things like moderately expanded efficacy against specific resistance mechanisms. There have also been approvals of new combinations of antibiotics with resistance modulators like beta-lactams with beta-lactamase inhibitors, but there really haven't been major introductions of novel classes or novel mechanisms, although the preclinical pipeline is looking increasingly diverse. So because of these challenges, the economic issues that lead to companies exiting antimicrobial R&D and the scientific difficulties, particularly surrounding new antibiotics for gram-negatives, the Pew Charitable Trust set out on this 3-year adventure where we provided a free data sharing platform to the community, focusing on early antibiotics discovery data. We curated published and unpublished data sets from literature, some from the literature, online databases, and from companies that were involved in antibiotics research like Achaogen, Novartis, and Merck. At the end of the project earlier this year, we had almost 300 data sets and about 160,000 compounds represented. This chart shows the distribution of targets in the primary assay types that we focused on. And we're currently evaluating next steps for the program, but the data remains accessible to download from CDD's public access website. So many organizations and initiatives are working to address the many challenges facing the AMR community. This list is in no way comprehensive, and I think pretty clearly reflects the areas that I'm involved in, but it should be a good starting place to learn more about AMR. The links in the knowledge column in particular provide a wealth of background information, not just on research, but also development, policy, funding, stewardship, and I encourage you all to explore these and share with GARDP what other resources and tools are important to your work so everyone can take advantage of them. In addition to these listed here, our three panelists will be sharing the resources offered by their respective organizations. But before we move on to their presentations, we would first like to poll the audience. Do you feel that you have the resources, specifically non-financial or funding related, to progress and reach your roles in antimicrobial R&D? And Victor is going to share a poll that it would be great if you all could respond to. All right, that is a great result. It would be very helpful if at the survey that is sent out at the end of the webinar, if you could share with GARDP what those resources are that are going to be helpful for you, specifically non-funding related, because we all know that we can always use more funding. Okay, so our first speaker today, let's move on, is Eva Garmendia from Uppsala University in Sweden, sharing her work on the AMR Studio podcast. Welcome, Eva. Please begin your presentation.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you, GARDP, for allowing me to be here today and giving me the space and the time to present to you all our biggest communication resource and effort from the Uppsala Antibiotic Center, our AMR Studio, which is a multidisciplinary podcast on antimicrobial resistance. I'm going to check that now my control is working. I believe so. Let me see. It's a bit of that delay. Sorry for the delay. Now, here we are. I would like to start the presentation by just telling you a little bit about myself and why am I here today talking to you about the AMR Studio. And I'm a person that I've been very interested in science since I'm very young, and I went ahead to study biology as the place to get introduced to research, and then I went on to do a PhD here at Uppsala University back in 2012. I started studying evolution of bacteria. I always been, very interested in research and the scientific method. But with the time and getting to know myself as an adult, I realized that I also love people, and I love facilitating, creating events, and creating opportunities for people to learn, to share their knowledge, and to move forward. And that's why I joined the Uppsala Antibiotic Center in 2018 to work as a science coordination and to bring out my passion for science communication as well. When the center started, it wasn't so clear if there's going to be a big portfolio of communication or science communication activities, and I thought that it was essential that the center, like Uppsala Antibiotic Center, will have a person that drives forward communication issues for the other scientists and other researchers and other AMR people, but also the public as well. I think I'm going to divide my presentation into three sections. One is going to be about the center itself and also what a center like ours has to offer for people like you that are listening to us today. Then I will move on to talk about the podcast and telling you what is it that we're doing and why we are so in love with this project. And I will end up with our mission, current and also future. What is it that we're hoping that this project is going to go to and is going to provide for the people out there? So about our center, what does a multidisciplinary center like the Uppsala Antibiotic Center has to offer? I think it comes to no surprise to all of you out there that AMR is a very complex issue. Katie presented very nicely how this is very complex when it comes to bring up new antibiotics and researching antibiotics and putting them out in the market. But this is much, much bigger than that. There is a lot of things coming from the natural sciences and technology, like getting to know how resistance works, finding new antibiotics, leading innovation, new diagnostics. But we cannot just focus on the scientific or natural sciences part. Policy is also very involved. We have to find solutions on how to govern in a sustainable situation where resistance is not really going to cut up to us. We cannot kind of keep it in check, even though it's never going to go away because it's a natural process. We can also look AMR from the aspect of history. What can we learn from the path that has led us to now? What are the lessons learned? What are the things not to do again? And how can we have a better future when it comes to AMR? And of course, the social sciences are something that we cannot leave aside, because resistance is really a problem because we humans are in the middle of it. Resistance is something that is found in the nature, and it helps different microbes and bugs to talk to each other and to have their ecological relationships. But when those bugs get resistance, when there's problems with infections, then we are in the middle, and our behavior and how we treat antibiotics, how we work with antibiotics is ultimately at play. So all those different disciplines are very tied together. They feed on each other. We should be able to learn from each other's experiences. We should be able to collaborate with each other, learn how to talk to each other in order to reach sustainable solution. The Uppsala Antibiotic Center, having this complexity in mind, was founded by Uppsala University in 2016, and it has a main goal. This goal is to help build a new generation of professionals with a unique perspective on the resistant problem and its possible sustainable solutions. So all these people working in the AMR sphere, they're going to be specialists in their own expertise and in their own topics, but they can also have an understanding of how all the other disciplines actually play a role on the AMR issue and learn from each other. Apart from being a research center, we are also an educational center. At the very, very core of our center is a research school. We are funding 14 PhD students at the moment, and we provide a multidisciplinary education with 3 main activities. It would be seminars, workshops, and symposia. I'm presenting this to you because generally these 3 main activities that we do are open for everybody. So you out there that might be interested into listening to research presentations from different professionals, or might want to go into workshops, which are one-day activities focused on teamwork and discussions, trying to come up with solutions most of the time, or research symposia, where we try to bring together academy, industry, and also the health sector, which are so essential for this AMR issue. And now a little bit about the podcast, which is what I'm here to talk to you about. Where did it come from? What was the idea? And what is it that we're doing out there? We'll call it Stories on Science, one episode at a time. The podcast comes from 2 main sentiments that are very important to us at the center and to the people that collaborate with us. One is, as I illustrated here by a quote by Jimmy Neal Smith, we are all storytellers. We all live in a network of stories. That there is a stronger connection between people than storytelling. I'm really inspired always when I talk to people about their paths. How did they get to study what they study? What are their insights and their thoughts about the area they're working in? How their experiences of working with other people has gone? What has worked? What hasn't worked so well? How do they think that things can be better done? These are at its core stories, right? We talk to people, we are connected by these stories. But also we live by the quote that science isn't finished until it is communicated. Because if science is done only in the labs, only in the companies, and the knowledge that is generated is not shared with anybody, then really there's no point to the science. Science feeds on each other and it gives back to society as well. And for that, there needs to be communication between people, towards the audience, towards the public, and all these different stakeholders within AMR in particular here we're talking about. So when we thought about setting up a podcast, it was because at the center activities, we were already bringing a lot of professionals, AMR researchers or AMR workers in different areas that have extensive knowledge. They have extensive experience in the topic. They have gone through different experiences, different challenges, hurdles, happy moments, and they were coming here to share their expertise for those particular activities. But I thought, I want to learn more from them, and I want to be able to share these with people out there. I think it's very important that we highlight the amazing work that people are doing, but also their personal stories. So we decided to make our podcast episodes in 2 parts. One, interviews which focus on personal stories from great professionals working on the AMR sphere, And of course, we also ask them about their work and share their work with us, but it's not just technical interviews, it's more like a personal one-to-one conversation to try to get to know them and pick their brains about the topic and the work they're doing. But also we have another part, which is research and news. We leave a little bit of time in every episode to cover 1 or 2 recent articles that we think are interesting, or maybe we cover the release of a new report within AMR or any news that happen around the world that we think are relevant for anybody out there to get to know. The voices at the AMR Studio, so if you tune in and you listen to the podcast, you're going to be hearing 2 people mainly, apart from our guests. One is me, which I'm a producer, and also I run interviews and I run the producing of the podcast, but also my colleague Jennifer Jackman, which also helps me out to undergo different interviews. And the cool thing, and I think, is that we have structured the podcast as a conversation between the 2 of us. That also, I think, makes it a little bit more interesting for people, because they're kind of like tuning in into the things that we talk to each other. Generally, we try to, after every interview, have a conversation thinking, what is it that we have learned from this interview? What do we think are the most interesting parts that the interviewee, our guest, has brought forward and we think the audience should actually keep in their minds? And we also do the news section together as well. If we talk a little bit about the numbers, there are 36 episodes published so far, almost 10,000 plays, which is amazing. And I know that the podcast has been listened in at least more than 50 countries. The system that we're using doesn't give us data for more than 50 countries. So I can say that at least 50 countries have at least 1 play of the podcast, which is kind of cool. The distribution of plays are all across the world, I would say, but the main areas are Sweden. Obviously, we are hosted in Sweden, so a lot of people have got to know about the podcast here, and also is used as an educational resource, as I'm going to talk a little bit now. And then United States, the UK, and Canada, and then you can see some other countries. And then those 1,000 plays, others are really spread all around the world. Our audience can be divided into, I think, 4 main pillars, even though I don't have a lot of information about the audience. But a part of the audience are students, so high school and university students that are undergoing courses that use the podcast as a learning resource and preparation before their classes or doing their practical projects. People that are new to AMR, so they're changing fields and changing careers, and they want to learn a little bit more about the AMR and kind of get up to speed about what things are important and what are the relevant things happening at the moment. Also researchers and people working in companies that want to expand their knowledge and get inspired. And health professionals, doctors, nurses, surgeons, that they live the resistant problem every day and they want to learn more about it. Here I have selected, pick a little bit of the diversity of the guests that we have at the podcast every month. Of course, there are 36 episodes. We have a lot of more people that have interviewed, but I think some of you might be familiar with some of these faces, like Kevin Otterson, the CARVEX director, and John Rex, who has a very, very, very nice resource, like Katie mentioned, AMR Solutions. He has a newsletter that is amazing, and we actually use to be informed every time he does it. And then we also have a mix of course, not only genders, obviously, but also of disciplines and also of seniority, so to speak. We invite people that are very senior, they have a lot of experience and a lot to share, but we also invite newer people in the AMR sphere because they bring a lot of new energy and a lot of new ideas and collaborative thoughts, and they are kind of finding now their way of how to talk to other people, how to set up collaborative projects, and it's very important. And also, I chose these people because they have maybe interesting things that we have learned by talking to them. Anne Kim Lee, she's an historian, and she's working on understanding how the antibiotics futures past. So how did we see the antibiotics working on history, but from the past, like in the 40s when they came up? What were the ideas of how antibiotics are going to play a role in history and the history of medicine, and learning from those lessons? Christian Munthe is a philosopher working with ethics in particular, and I learned with him that ethics are basically embedded in anything that is AMR related, because AMR in itself is a thing based on dilemmas and a thing based on different perspectives and ethics can help us understand a lot of the issues that are happening around in AMR. Catherine Will, a sociologist, taught me that when we are doing AMR campaigns and communications around AMR, we really need to focus on who are we leaving behind? Are we actually being inclusive? Are we thinking about topics of marginalization and inclusivity from the different experiences that people might have with resistance and with antibiotics? Fredrik Almqvist, a chemist, he actually was an incredible example of how to start to work in a multidisciplinary way. When he was doing his postdoc, he went abroad and he was invited to join the lab meetings of someone that was working in something very different but wanted to pick his brain from his own discipline. And he was like, after working in that system, I really wanted to continue working with a lot of people with different disciplines and different ideas. And it was a beautiful example of what we think AMR and AMR research should be. Ursula Feruf-Bacher, she's an independent AMR scientist, as she calls herself, and listening to her story and how she got to be so knowledgeable in so many different areas and being able to be a consultant and helping people to understand each other was also super nice. And Chantal Morel, an economist, was also a very nice example of new ideas and new pushing forward to try to get innovative solutions. So these are just examples. We have many more people, and you're welcome to just visit our website and tune in anything that might pique your interest as well. And just to finish our mission, our hope for the future, we want to continue keeping inspiring people out there, inspiring by sharing the stories of all the amazing AMR scientists, AMR workers, or even AMR people that have been touched by AMR in one way or another. We want to continue motivating collaborative research and people talking to each other and understanding each other in order to come to this sustainable solution within AMR. And of course, we want to promote collaboration also through these conversations and these stories. We want people to see how could their own research, their own work, help other people's research and work and promote collaborations that way. But above all, what we want to do is to keep sharing stories, keep sharing the news, keep sharing why we are so amazed and we think AMR is so important, and keep sharing the love for communication and for storytelling and human connection within the frame of AMR. With this, I want to say thanks to all of you that have listened to me. Thank you, Katy, for introducing me. I leave here the news list in case you want to sign up and be able to get all the events that are happening at the center. And you can find us in Twitter, in YouTube, and in LinkedIn as well. And in all podcast platforms, if you put the AMR Studio, you are going to be able to find our episodes. Thank you again, and I hope to have some questions in the Q&A session. Bye.
Thank you very much, Eva. Yes, everybody, you can use the Q&A feature to submit questions for Eva, and we'll ask them at the end. I now have the pleasure to welcome David Jenkins from the British Society for Antimicrobial Chemotherapy and the University Hospital, Leicester, England. Welcome, David. You can now begin.
Thank you very much, Katie. And I'd like to first of all thank GARDP for giving me the opportunity to present today. It's a real delight for me to be able to do this. It's one of my first tasks as the new president of the British Society for Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, or BSAC for short. BSAC is in its 50th year this year, founded in 1971 by a group of British microbiologists. It's an organization which has a very diverse membership. Although it was set up by microbiologists, it includes not only microbiologists now, so microbiologists in England are doctors, medically qualified doctors who supervise microbiology laboratories, but also provide clinical advice and treatment for patients with infections. In conjunction, again, with colleagues such as infectious disease physicians, who are also members of BSAC, as well as antimicrobial pharmacists, clinical scientists working in laboratories, both in healthcare laboratories and research labs. And we also have representation from pharmaceutical industry, very valuable insights from those members. And we also have veterinary microbiologists, veterinary practitioners, and non-medical people, non-veterinary people, for example, sociologists, economists, as part of our membership. It's a very broad wide open society, and it's British, but it has an international membership, and membership is free. So if you're not a member of BSAC and you think the BSAC is for you, then please go to the website bsac.org.uk and fill in the membership application form. As I say, the basic membership is free, no charge, nothing. So there's no reason at all not to be a member of BSAC if it's for you. So moving on to my first slide, if I can move it forward. Is it going forward? Try that. No, let's try this one. No, that doesn't work. Let's try.
David, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Now, can you hear me and see me? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. Founded in 71, 135 countries around the world. We call us, it's a British society by name, but it's a society with a global outlook, and we do what we can do to support good antimicrobial prescribing. We recognize antibiotics, antimicrobials generally as fundamental to provision of healthcare, and making sure that antimicrobials continue to work in the face of resistance is really crucial to providing healthcare across the world. And we're very keen to provide free open source educational resources to support research in antimicrobials and the clinical use of antimicrobials as well. Our website is key to all of this. It provides links across all our resources. So bsac.org.uk is the place to go. You can see here from this screenshot the sort of things we do. We provide education, we set up events. We're also lobbyists within the UK government. We provide opportunities for political engagements, and we also support the publications of two journals. One of them, the Journal of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, is a very well-established journal at the forefront of antimicrobial research, publishing articles in all sorts of basic science and clinical applications of antimicrobials. Journal of Antimicrobial Resistance is a much newer journal. It's only been around for about 2 or 3 years now, I think. And it's open source, online only. And its primary aim is to support medical education. And I'll talk a bit more about JAK AMR, the orange one, in a few minutes. So BSAC is a global educator. We consider education to be a very powerful tool to counter the threat from antimicrobial resistance. Bacteria are working all the time. Our intelligence is what sets us apart from the bacteria, and we really need to exploit that as much as possible in order to keep on top of resistance. And we look at antimicrobial resistance from every angle, from basic science all the way up to political advocacy, and our BSAC courses reflect that. We consider that BSAC, these courses help join the dots and the public. There we go, it's very slow. Okay, and by joining up all these dots, we encourage and enable knowledge.
We've lost your audio again, David.
Right. We started in 2017 with an agreement between the University of Dundee and the Open University and BSAC in setting up a massive open online course, a MOOC, on antimicrobial stewardship. This has been a very successful course, I think, with over 100,000 people viewing.
David, I think there's something going on with your mic.
Sorry, when I press forward, the microphone goes off for some reason.
We can hear you now, though.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Sorry about that.
David, I can just move this slide on for you.
Can you move it? Yeah,
if
I'm
you say
sure that'll
next
make
slide,
life a
please.
lot easier. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
If we move, next slide, please. So this shows some of the range of the courses we run. So we've got courses in vaccines, on fungal diagnostics, antimicrobial stewardship in clinical, human and antimicrobial practice. Next slide. Some of our courses are very specific to particular topics. For example, we've got a recent course on procalcitonin, the use of procalcitonin as a biomarker for antimicrobial stewardship, how to use this biomarker to support antimicrobial stewardship, to support the diagnosis of infections and to rule out infections in conditions that look like the patient's got an infection. We've got courses in a number of languages. For example, we've got an introduction to practical microbiology that was initially in English, but now we have a Spanish language version. Our original antimicrobial stewardship massive open online course is now available in Chinese, Russian, Spanish, and Portuguese translations. We have a social science approach to tackling antimicrobial resistance. Eva mentioned the diversity of approaches to antimicrobial resistance, and we recognize that in BSAC too. And we realize that antimicrobial prescribing isn't just a clinical practice, it's a behavioral event as well. And knowing how to tackle what we consider as inappropriate antibiotic prescribing and use social science methodology to support that is fundamental to good antimicrobial stewardship. Working out how to count antibiotic prescribing, so point prevalence surveys, how to carry out point prevalence surveys in your clinical setting is also something that we've got courses for. Most of our courses, our MOOCs, are in 2 to 4 weeks duration for about 3 or 4 hours coursework a week. And they're freely available for up to 8-week periods. If you want longer access, you have to pay for some of that. And also if you want to get credit through course completion and certification, again, that would incur a cost. But the basic course itself is freely available. Next slide, please. We also run short webinars, so 1 or 2 hours courses on some hot topics. And you can see the bullet points here again indicate some of the topics that we've been looking at. And COVID-19 has been an important element in the last year. Clearly, a lot of patients have been given antibiotics when they've got COVID-19 because of the concern of secondary bacterial infection. But I think increasingly we've realized that most of these patients don't have bacterial infections and antibiotics are not necessary. So distinguishing between those patients and those patients who really do need antibiotics is obviously very, very important. So we've had webinars on using procalcitonin and also using telemedicine because of the issues about trying to reduce contact with infectious patients. So the role of telemedicine during COVID-19 and their use in antimicrobial stewardship. So we're very responsive to hot topics that are happening around us. And we're very keen to make sure that our webinars and our massive open online courses really reflect the needs of clinicians and researchers in carrying out good antimicrobial research and use. Next slide, please. Although we are a British society, our courses are freely available across the world. And you can see here some of the areas that of people around the world have been taking part in our courses. So quite a good proportion across Europe, but also in Asia and Africa, as well as in other continents as well. So hundreds of thousands of unique learners and downloads. So quite an impressive impact, I think. Next slide, please. We publish a freely available book on antimicrobial stewardship. Just go to the BSAC website, navigate towards this book, Antimicrobial Stewardship from Principles to Practice, and you can download it either as a PDF or an EPUB file. And this is, as I say, it's freely available. You don't even have to be a member of BSAC to get this. Next slide. I mentioned Journal of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, which is a very well-established journal, and we now have JAC AMR, and this is a really quite a unique journal, I think, in terms of antimicrobial use. We still have original articles with research which is focused more on the use of antimicrobials and how to make sure antimicrobials are used effectively and appropriately. We have regular reviews in this journal, viewpoints, guidance. We've just published some recent guidance on the management of methicillin-resistant Staph aureus infections. And we also have viewpoints and debates, so different sides of arguments for doing things, whether it's laboratory-based practice or clinical practice. And I think what must be a unique element to this is a section on educational non-commercial resources. Next slide. And so if you go to the JAC AMR website, there is a section on antimicrobial resistance and stewardship e-learning repositories, and you can we've attached, so we've got links through this website to a wide range of both peer and non-peer reviewed multimedia antimicrobial resistance stewardship educational resources from around the world, and you can filter by topic or by geographical area on the courses that you're interested in. And we also provide some kind of a kind of commentary and peer and assessment of these courses within JAC AMR, at least for some of these so far. Next slide. And what must be unique through in terms of antimicrobial and resistant societies, we've also got an opera. So we recently supported the development and production of an opera called The Mold That Changed the World. This was presented at the world famous Edinburgh Festival, I think in 2019, and it had rave reviews. It was a sellout every night. And we now offer this as both a professional production and also for schools to set up their own school-based production of this. It's an opera based on Alexander Fleming and the discovery of penicillin. And unfortunately, COVID has kind of interrupted the productions that we've intended to have over the last year or so. But we're getting news coming in now about sponsorship for productions of this opera in the United States. So hopefully within a very short period of time, we'll be back up and running with this opera again as an educational resource. So it's both entertainment and education. Next slide, please. So we've talked a bit about a wide range of things. We've talked about the open access webinars, the MOOCs. We run conferences, events. Sometimes these are limited, or at least there's a fee attached. So strictly speaking, not open access, freely available. But we do work with other organizations. For example, GARDP. We've recently run an antimicrobial chemotherapy conference in conjunction with GARDP. Next slide. And we've got collaborations with a wide range of other organizations, including the Intensive Care Africa Network, ICANN, the British Pharmacological Society. We're developing work in conjunction with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, as well as the European Wound Management Association. So our philosophy really is collaborate and educate and do this as much as possible, freely available, to make things as open source as possible. Next slide. Next slide. So I've mentioned this several times, but our website is the key to our information. Go to bsac.org.uk, have a browse through that. If you think BSAC is for you, then we'd really like to see you as members. Sign up and join. And also, I'd like to highlight our specific website for Infection Learning's, our educational hub. So www.infectionlearninghub.co.uk. And this is a repository, a kind of curated collection of all our educational resources. I think that's our last slide. Is that correct? Can you move to the next slide, please? Yes, that's right. Okay, thanks very much. I'm sorry for the technical problems during part of that. I'm not sure what got on there, but thanks very much again for the opportunity to present, and hand you back now to Katie.
Thank you very much, David. Now I have the pleasure to welcome Astrid Pentz-Murr, who you may recognize as from Revive and GARDP. Welcome, Astrid. You can now start your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. So in our usual Revive webinars, we always take 2 or 3 minutes to talk about our activities, but I'm really happy that today I have a bit more time to talk in more detail about the variety of activities that we actually offer. All right, so Revive was launched in January 2018 to ensure knowledge is retained and the antimicrobial R&D community is supported to connect, share, and acquire information. As most of you know, companies continue to leave the field of antibiotic development, and therefore many researchers have either retired or refocused their activities on other areas. GARDP saw a risk of knowledge getting lost, and therefore Revive was developed to address this gap. So GARDP Scientific Affairs team develops a variety of activities and materials, which are all hosted on our Revive website and are freely accessible for all. So here, a very quick overview of our different activities. We have 3 different webinar series, which I will explain in more detail later. We develop sessions and boot camps at conferences, as well as a standalone conference with the British Society for Antimicrobial Chemotherapy, as David already mentioned. We also host antimicrobial viewpoint articles on our website, which are written by either GARDP internal or external experts on various aspects of AMR. And end of last year, we have launched our resource section. At the moment, this hosts the Antimicrobial Encyclopaedia and the resource library. But this year, we are also working on a new resource, which will be an antibiotic discovery and development roadmap. Stay tuned for that, but I hope it will come out this year. An essential part of our work is collaboration and networking. We are very happy that many experts in the field are supporting our work, and also we are collaborating with many scientific societies worldwide and other partner organizations who kindly help us to promote and disseminate our work. So a little bit more about our webinar series. The Revive webinars is our most established form of content. We started them in June 2018, so it's kind of the 3-year anniversary right now. And these are about practical topics related to antimicrobial drug discovery and development. The format is that they are about 90 minutes in length, usually, maximum. They have 1 to 5 speakers with slide presentations, but we always make sure to have at least 30 minutes left for audience Q&A, as we think this is really important to give our audience the chance to ask actual questions to our experts. The audience here is a rather technical one. It is scientists from industry and academia. This really includes various institutions worldwide, big companies, small biotechs. Is really, I want to say almost everybody is there sooner or later, but also clinicians, as well as representatives or people from regulatory agencies or NGOs. In addition to that, we develop in collaboration with GARDP's communication team, the GARDP corporate webinars. These are about topics which are close to or feature GARDP's own work. The format varies a little bit. It are between 60 to 90 minutes. They usually have a handful of speakers as well, sometimes with slides. But most of the time, these webinars are more discussion-based. But also, we make sure to have an audience Q&A. The audience there usually includes our Revive audience, but we have the aim to also have a bit of a broader audience, which might include journalists or governmental representatives or funders. And finally, we are launching a new series on the 1st of July, which we are very excited about. These are the AMR discussions. These will be about broad topics, in broad field of AMR, not specifically on the technical side like the Revive webinars. And some of these topics might be even a bit controversial or at least have no clear consensus, and they might also touch upon policy issues. They will be 60 minutes in length with a curated panel discussion and no slides, but again, with audience Q&A. And the audience for these webinars will probably be similar to the corporate webinars, and here we hope to also attract policymakers. Okay. So I will also give you a bit of an idea of what kind of topics we had on these kind of webinars. So as I said, the Revive webinars are our educational webinars. And you find all recordings of all our webinars, all 3 types, on our website as shown here on the revive.gardp.org/webinars for free, of course. And here I also put just a little selection of rather recent webinars. And as you can see, we had various topics related to preclinical and clinical aspects of antimicrobial development. We also sometimes develop webinars in collaboration with other organizations. For example, we had a webinar with the Pew Trust some time ago, and recently this March, we had a webinar together with the TB Alliance, because we had several times in our post-webinar survey, people asked for TB-related topics, and this is not a focus area of GARDP. We looked to the experts of the TB Alliance to support us with this topic. Then the GARDP webinars, as I said, is a presentation and panel discussions about topics related to our own work. These are the 4 GARDP webinars which we have hosted so far. You see 2 of them have been about children's antibiotics, which is a very important key topic of work for GARDP ourselves. In June last year, we had a broader webinar about our research efforts, and last March, we had a webinar about learning from COVID-19 to tackle the silent pandemic of antibiotic resistance. And now to our new series. So as I said, it will be panel discussions about various topics related to AMR. And the first one will be about balancing access to and stewardship of antimicrobials in low and middle income countries. If you go to the website as indicated here, you will find the registration link for this webinar. Also from our side, a few statistics. So we have held so far 40 webinars, which includes Revive and GARDP webinars, with over 16,000 registrations and more than 7,400 live participants. Our most popular webinar so far had almost 400 live attendees. We are very happy to see that people join our webinars from all over the world. So we have people join from at least 114 countries live in our webinars. And in each individual webinar, we have about 30 to 40 countries live on the line. Now coming to our conference activities. GARDP co-organizes, I must say here, sessions and bootcamps for various key conferences in the field. And many of these contributions we have done together with CARBEX, JPI, AMR, Repair Impact Fund, and Wellcome Trust. And in future, we also are looking to collaborate with the AMR Action Fund to develop more meaningful content for important conferences. These conferences have included the ASM ESCMID conference on drug development to meet the challenge of antimicrobial resistance in 2017, 18, and 19. In this conference format, we have always co-organized the so-called bootcamp sessions. Unsurprisingly, in 2020, this conference was cancelled, but luckily, as our webinar series was already well established, it was very easy for us to pick up the planned content and deliver as webinars instead. So we didn't miss the opportunity to develop these very interesting sessions on exploring safety issues in antimicrobial drug development, as well as moving from preclinical to clinical stage. Other conferences where we had sessions were ECCMID 2018, as well as ASM Microbe 2018 and 19, and the Biochem AMR Conference 2020. In 2019, we had the pleasure to co-organize the Antimicrobial Chemotherapy Conference together with BSAC. Back then, it was an in-person conference in January in London. And in this year, we held another ACC conference, which was entirely virtual, which took place February of this year. And I'm happy to let you know that we're already planning ACC 2022, which will again be entirely virtual and taking place in February. I also have to note that you can find the recordings of all of these conferences and conference sessions on our website. So here a little word about our Antimicrobial Viewpoints series. So these are short articles about various topics related to AMR. They're written by GARDP internal or external experts. And you find all of them on our website. I also want to point out that if you would like to write an antimicrobial viewpoint article yourself, you can reach out to us with a proposal. A little word about our resources. So as I said, the most important and most developed here for the moment is the Antimicrobial Encyclopaedia. This resource offers short definitions for key terms in the field. Currently, there are 140 terms on the website, but I must say this is a growing resource and we will be adding more terms over time. And we are also very interested to hear from you which terms are missing. So if you go to the website, you will see these tiles. And if you click on any one of these tiles, you will open a little page. And there you will find a short definition of each term, a few links with further reading materials, and topic tags, which will help you to search for related content. Also in the text, we usually place links to related terms. And some terms are also complemented by short expert videos, such as this one on bacterial efflux by Jessica Blair. We also have the resource library. This hosts all of our own content. This means all our webinars, viewpoints, and everything else is searchable in this library, either by keyword or tags or by a combination of both. But in addition to our own resources, we are also uploading valuable external resources. So we're basically just linking them and tagging them so that you find in which topic area they fit. So again, this is a growing resource and we will be adding more over time. And again, my call to you, please share valuable resources with us. If there's any tool, database, articles, guidelines, anything which is helpful for you in your daily work with antimicrobials, please just send us the link. That's all it takes. And we will consider to add it to the library. Now to our expert network. Revive is currently supported by 131 individuals with an expertise in antimicrobial research and development, or its economics and regulation. 48 of these are currently contributing experts, which means they might have written a viewpoint article or spoken on a webinar or have helped us with another form of content. And 83 are endorsing experts, which means they support the idea of Revive and hopefully also they support our promotional activities. Our experts are currently based in 21 countries, and it is our aim to broaden the geographic representation here. And finally, our collaborations. So there are 73 partner organizations and scientific societies all over the world who have kindly agreed to support our outreach. Some of them share our news information in newsletters or on our websites, or they share it on social media, which we are very grateful for. And we are also continuously looking for new collaborations. But we are also looking at the scientific societies in different countries to help us find experts in these regions, especially in regions which are still underrepresented in our expert network. So how to get involved with us if you want to, I hope you do. Please reach out to us if you want to propose to develop an antimicrobial viewpoint article or, for example, also an encyclopedia entry. But in both cases, please come to us with a proposal before you invest a lot of time to make sure that not somebody else is already working on the same topic. You may also propose webinar topics or speakers to us, or let us know which encyclopedia terms are urgently missing. As I said, please share valuable resources for the library, and you may also nominate experts for our network. Also, of course, you can ask us how you can help us to spread the word about our activities, and please feel free to ask any other questions or make suggestions, all via our email address, revive@gardp.org. And you can also connect with GARDP via Twitter and LinkedIn as shown here. And last but not least, our newsletter. So everybody who is watching this webinar right now as a registered participant is automatically on our mailing list unless you opt out from it. But for those who maybe watch this as a video later on, please follow this link to subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date about our activities. And with this, I want to thank the audience for their attention and also GARDP's funders for their support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Astrid. And again, thank you to all of the panelists that presented today. Before we begin the Q&A session, we are going to ask the audience another question. This will be very helpful for all the presenters today. What media do you most prefer for your training resources? Okay, it may not be surprising since we are currently at a webinar that most people are preferring webinars or videos or podcasts. It is surprising to me that nobody likes newsletters because that would have been my favorite choice. But now that we've done that, we would like to move on to the Q&A. As a reminder, you can submit your questions as shown on the next slide using the Q&A feature. Please include the name of the speaker if you're asking a specific speaker a question, and we should have enough time to answer everyone's questions today. So the first question that I have is probably for David and Astrid. Are any of your courses available in Spanish, either spoken or maybe with Spanish subtitles?
Well, we have two that I know of that have Spanish language versions. One is an introduction to practical microbiology, so this is more kind of bench work, and that's available in Spanish as well as in English. And then the other one is our antimicrobial stewardship massive open online course, which is available in Spanish as well as Portuguese and Mandarin and Russian, as well as English, of course. I'm not aware that we've got any others in Spanish, but you know, if there's a demand for this, then that's something clearly we'd like to respond to.
Thank you, David.
So from our side, from the revived materials from GARDP, unfortunately for now, everything is only available in English. We might run a survey later this year to see if there's really a need in our audience for other languages. I cannot promise that we will ever have the capacity to translate the videos, but we might be able to provide translated transcripts one day.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, both of you. The next question that I have is for Astrid. Can you tell us anything more about the antibiotics discovery and development roadmap that you mentioned?
Yeah, so this project is in a very early stage, and we really hope to get it off the ground by the end of this year. But we are hoping to develop an interactive tool which will help people to learn more about the very complex path from discovery to development of antimicrobials. This will be connected, for example, with our encyclopedia. So it will just be another way of putting things into perspective.
That sounds very interesting. I can't wait to see that. So Eva, what would you say is the most difficult part of creating content for your episodes?
I think perhaps there is, so the people that we normally interview are not generally maybe very used to being on media, especially younger people. So I think sometimes it's a bit like, oh, I'm not gonna know what to say, or my story is not interesting, or I don't have anything interesting to share, and because they think that, you know, they might not have been in the area for very long, or that maybe their personal stories are not interesting enough. But we always tell them that, you know, it's the little details or the little stories or the little anecdotes of how they got to be where they are that are very enlightening, and they're very motivational for other people. Like, for example, I don't know, John Rex shared with us that he never really intended to do a newsletter, which is now very popular and a lot of people use it. Like, I just wanted to put together the information I knew, and then people started to ask me to share it with them, and then it kind of turned into something that I never really intended like that. And this, or for example, I have I had someone that told me Kevin Utterson told me that he got into AMR because of a footnote that he wrote in one article that he was writing, a very long article. It was not related to AMR at all, but it was like, I wrote this footnote saying everything that I'm publishing about this right now would not actually apply in the case of innovative resources that lose their effectivity over time, like antibiotics. And he left it there, and he was like, it kept bugging me that it was in the back of my head that this thing I have been working on for so long, it would not work in the case of antibiotics. So he decided, I'm going to actually put effort to understand how all these things would work in the case of antibiotics, and that's how he got into AMR. So I think these personal stories are very interesting for people out there to have an open mind that any thought that you might have about something can turn into something good that can be perhaps the rest of your career. So I tell the people that we invite that everybody has something to share and has something valuable that people are going to want to listen to. So I think getting the people to be okay with sharing their personal stories or thinking they're valuable it's a hard thing.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you is, what are the primary challenges you face in maintaining these podcasts?
Sorry, I didn't hear properly, kind of muffle off.
Sorry about that. Can you also share what are the biggest challenges that you face in maintaining your podcast?
In maintaining the podcast, well, I think time, it's kind of a thing because I don't work only as a communicator, but I work also as a coordinator, and I arrange all the activities, and I work with everything that has to do with the center, and also internal communication, external communications, setting up the website, managing the social media and all that. So I wish I had more time to create more content, or maybe make something a little bit more produced, because if you listen to it, it's basically we run the interview, we cut it in a way that it's flowy, and then we have this conversation between Jenny and I, but sometimes I would love to have more time to make something a bit more produced in a sense, but I like that because I have so many other things to do. So I think time, it's always a restriction, and you know, we don't want to do hiatus. We want to every month to be out there. I would like to make special episodes about things that are happening around, and I wish I had more time. Just that.
I think a lot of people probably agree that there's not enough time in the day for everything that they want to get done. Could you just remind the listeners right now the URL to sign up for your podcast?
So yeah, it's bit.ly, so bit.ly/UAC in capital letters, news list in small letters. So you can also find it if you go to our website and you scroll down, there is a link to how to just to sign up, and it's uac.uu.se. That's our general website.
Okay. Thank you very much. And also the slides that that everybody presented today that have the web addresses and the links will be shared with everybody attending after later on. Okay, another question for Astrid. You mentioned that there were videos from experts in the Revive Encyclopedia. How can visitors to that page tell which ones have videos?
You should be able to find this by using the library search and adding the content format video. Like this, you should be able to find all the ones where there are video. Currently, I think we have only about 10 videos. Also, it's a similar issue as Eva mentioned. It's a matter of time to produce these, but we are always looking for more experts to help us out with videos.
Fantastic. I hope to see more of those. For David, you did mention that production of the opera was going to hopefully start up again. Do you have any ideas on where global audiences can be viewing that?
Well, it's early days yet. We're looking at potential productions in some parts of the United States. To be honest, I've not seen it yet because I wasn't able to get to Edinburgh to look at it. So, you know, it'd be great if we can start having meetings again with real people in big concert halls and that sort of thing. So I think that if we get new productions of it, that will have an added cachet to it, apart from just the content. The whole experience of being in a performance or seeing a performance again would be wonderful. As I say, it's based about the discovery of penicillin by Alexander Fleming. So the mold that changed the world. It's self-explanatory, I think. In terms of it being educational resource, well, it is an educational resource particularly for children, because we have this both a professional performance plan for it, but we also want to support production by schools. And the way that would happen is that we would have professional support for schools and other organizations to put on shows. So a mixture of both a professional and amateur production. And so the participants would learn whilst they're rehearsing, but also then the audience would learn as well. And you know, education is a very broad term. It can be anything from, you know, postgraduate or postgraduate education at university, and specific courses that are run for particular audiences, but anything generally that informs and educates in an accurate and reliable and effective way is education. Something like an opera can potentially teach many more people about the importance of antimicrobial resistance and the importance of antimicrobials in keeping healthcare going than any number of scientific papers.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Putting this sort of important scientific information into formats that lay audiences are interested in consuming is critical to science communication. On that note, I do want to note, Eva, that you have a fan in the audience who is very excited that you're here in the webinar.
Nice.
And I do have another question for Astrid. Are students able to contribute to writing viewpoints?
Well, students are definitely welcome to send us a proposal. Currently, the viewpoint articles are definitely expert articles, so we wouldn't be able to accommodate in this very series articles of maybe very junior members of the community. But I'm very happy to see every proposal, because we always have ideas of launching new forms of content. We might also launch a specific series for early career researchers. So definitely get in touch, please.
That's really great. So I do want to give the speakers the opportunity to ask any questions that they have for the other speakers at this time.
So I was wondering, Eva, I mean, do you have a kind of wish list of speakers for the future, and possibly more hypothetically, you know, who would you have liked to interview on your podcast, perhaps who is no longer around? You know,
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Who have one that is not, so for the course, I can answer the future thing more. I would like to also start introducing not only people working with AMR, but I would like to also start perhaps interviewing to some key patients or people that have suffered or have experienced AMR from, you know, from a very personal note. I think those voices and those personal stories are very important as well, and I think I would like to give them voice to that. I'll also wanna have a mix of, as I said, very senior and very well-known people in the area, but also younger people. So have a mix of the both. For the future, we're planning. Well, now I can say we're gonna have Monica from GARDP in the autumn. We have also invited Dame Sally Davis with her extensive experience to be part of it. So I think as the podcast is getting to be a little bit more well known and there is more spread all around the world, you know, people have a little bit more of an incentive to be part of it and to be sharing with the audience that we normally have between 200 and 300 plays per episode, which I think is quite okay for the very niche topic that we have in our podcast. If I were someone that is not around, well, I mean, I would have loved to talk to Louis Pasteur. You know, I'm a very big fan. Actually, I have a quote by him, you know, in my emails. It's like my personal quote, and I also put it in my PhD thesis, which is the role of the infinitely small in nature is infinitely great. And I think his insights and everything that he was the first one on sounding the alarm that resistance is going to be a big problem. Back in the Nobel lecture, a really long time ago, he was like, microbes are going to evolve. They're going to get resistant to antibiotics. So he was already talking about that back then, and nobody thought that this was more than just a biological problem, that it was not going to become a societal problem or a problem for everyone out there. So having talked to him about his ideas and why he already thought this was so important would have been really, really great.
Oh, wonderful.
That was a great question, David. Thank you. We do have another audience question, and I think it's probably for you, David. Are there e-certificates that can be given to attendees for the courses, which I think you briefly might have mentioned, but maybe.
Yeah. So the MOOCs in particular, I mean, there are certificates for the massive open online courses, but you have to pay up a subscription, or you have to stump up a fee for those. And you know, I guess the question is it worth it? Personally, I'd say no, but I probably that's not the best thing to say, because I'm sure they're after the money to support the course development. But to my mind, it's always the knowledge is the important thing rather than a bit of paper. So I would definitely go on these courses for the knowledge. I mean, I supported the development of the first one. I think I present the first week in conjunction with a colleague of mine. It's really quite a challenge to make these things. I must say it was very educational for me. And so perhaps it might be worthwhile if people are interested in MOOCs, thinking about doing one themselves, because there's nothing so good. I think the best way of learning is to think about teaching. And setting up your own courses, I think, is a very great way of providing education to yourself as well as to others. And if you are teaching to anybody else, think about recording what you're doing. And we know it's so easy now these days to publish what you're doing. I mean, you can do something on you can do a video on for a small group of people, for students, for trainees in your clinical practice or whatever, and record it, stick it on YouTube, and suddenly you've got a global audience. And I don't think the certification is important anymore, to be honest. Coming back to the question, it's knowledge is really the important thing.
By the way, I have to correct myself just a moment. I said Poster, but it was actually Fleming, Alexander Fleming. How did I mix up them two? Alexander Fleming was the one in his Nobel lecture that sounded the alarm. But Louis Pasteur also was a great mind to try to get to know and understand his thoughts.
Actually, David, about the accreditations, I think it would be good for us. I will reach out to some of you from BSAC to see actually how many people really want to have accreditation, because it's always been on my to-do list to look into getting accreditation for our webinars. But you know, with all the other things to do, we've just never gotten around to do it. And now, after what you said, I'm thinking maybe we don't need it. Just for the audience here, also there is an certificate of attendance, an electronic one, which you will get after these webinars. But of course, it's not part of any official accreditation scheme.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you both.
That's an interesting one. Can I ask? I mean, I don't know if I can ask questions of the audience, but I'm really keen to understand what people want in terms of subject matter. I mean, clearly we do what we can, and we've got quite a wide range of subject topics in our courses so far. But I appreciate there are many other things that people might want to have a course on, and I don't know if there's any way that people can suggest anything, perhaps in the chat. For example, one of my key pet interests is data analysis, and you know, I use a software package called R. And I don't know if you know that, but it's a wonderful resource. It's freely available software. And actually, you know, if we're talking about what's freely available, then software packages such as R and AMR Studio, which is a kind of development environment for R, are freely available, download straightforward, and lots of resources on the internet for training in how to use R for statistical analysis and model development and so on. You know, just Google the letter R and you will come across it. But I know that R has a very steep learning curve, and you know, once you get into it, I find it completely absorbing. But you do need to perhaps have your hand held when you're getting involved in R. And if anybody would be, if it's worthwhile us developing courses on data analysis, for example, looking at antimicrobial resistance rates, mapping them, you can do geographical information systems with R, and just map all your resistance by locality, by hospital ward or whatever. I mean, all this stuff is freely available. But if that's worthwhile developing, let me know, or let BSAC know, and we'll try and develop it.
I absolutely love R myself.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it is a fantastic tool. It can do anything. I do have a comment from an audience member that they would like to see a course on current diagnostic options for AMR.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you know of any of those resources that already exist, that'd be great to hear. But if if there's no courses yet, that might be a good option. I'd love to see a course on using R for antibiotics discovery analysis.
Yeah. I think absolutely. I mean, Eva, you're nodding there. Is that something? Are you used to using R, or Astrid? Have you come across R?
I have touched it briefly during my PhD, but I must admit I failed at the steep learning curve, and it wasn't important enough for my project.
Right, interesting.
It's the same for me. I tried to do some data analysis that I could do also the old-fashioned way, but R was gonna be, also the R graphic package is beautiful. And then my friend that is very into R said like, yeah, I'll give you the beginners. And then he put this super thick book in my desk. He was like, here's the beginner's guide to R. And I was like, what do I do with this? So I was like, I tried a couple of things. He gave me some very basic things, but I never really ended up using it properly.
Well, there's a wonderful guy called Hadley Wickham who works for AMR Studio, and I mean the R practitioners are incredibly generous because they release all their work for other people for free. So Hadley Wickham's got this R for Data Science book, which you can either buy the physical copy, or you can go and get for free the electronic version at R for. Just Google R for Data Science. It's r4ds.had.co.nz, NZ, sorry, New Zealand. These are, I think, if you're dealing with anything to do with any quantitative work, then very rapidly you need some kind of statistical package, even if it's just for drawing some nice graphs. And as you mentioned, Eva, there are some beautiful graphics packages in our ggplot.
The ggplot, yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I do have a question. If you don't have any other questions, Katie, from the audience, I have a question.
There was one more question. They wanted to know about, I think they're maybe getting to, is there a mentorship program from GARDP, or like connecting students with professionals to help them with publishing and keeping in touch and learning? Is there any sort of program like that?
There is no formal program like that, but I invite everybody to look at our experts on our website. We are also in the process of adding contact details to their profiles for those who have consented to this. And also we are always happy to receive informal requests, and we try to help as much as we can. But of course, we also receive many requests which we just unfortunately cannot fulfill, like to do internships with us directly or jobs. We actually, the scientific affairs team in GARDP is a very small team with 3 people, 2 of which you have seen in this webinar, and then our scientific director. So our abilities here are a bit limited, but everybody can feel free to reach out and we see what we can do.
Yeah, I always recommend that folks reach out. The worst that can happen is that you'll be in exactly the same position that you were before you asked.
Exactly.
And same thing, sending ideas or suggestions for things. The worst that can happen is that you continue to unfortunately not have that resource. Okay, so Eva, you mentioned you had a question, and I think that this will probably be the last one.
Yeah, I mean, because here we'll be presenting our own resources, but I'm curious to know for you, Astrid and David, when you need to look for new information and we need to update yourself, what resources do you guys use?
Well, I mean, Google is the #1 for me. So just doing a web search and spending a bit of time going through all of that. I mean, there's some often dead ends and false hopes, but I mean, I'm probably the oldest one here, I guess. I must be I'm definitely the oldest person here. So I know the pre-internet era and how difficult it was to get information then. I find every single day a delight now when I'm trying to find information. It's so wonderful. It's so easy compared to when you had to go to a library, look things up, try and find the book or the journal. and you would almost guarantee that the number you wanted was missing or was in the wrong value. So the world is a much easier place now than ever was to find out information, to get in touch with people, to see things on YouTube or on webinars or anything like that. It's the only limitation is really your imagination, your time. We've mentioned time already, and just choosing the right search terms. Just keep going for it. It's so fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Google is always the first place to go to. And one thing I also noticed while looking at the slides for this webinar, the ones which Katie presented, with the big selection of other resources. And I realized that some of them I know and some of a bit, but not in detail, and some of them I don't know at all. So I realized actually I have some homework to do there to understand which of these resources are really valuable for us ourselves, and also to make connections and maybe new collaborations. Because from our perspective, we don't have any aim to be competitive, but collaborative. There's no reason to be redundant with other activities. Therefore, we always aim to rather work together than against each other, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a couple of those links that I shared are for knowledge hubs, and they are very extensive lists of even more resources that individuals can access. So I do very much encourage everyone to check those out and use those.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I would like to thank everyone again, and also encourage the audience to complete the survey that you received from GARDP afterwards. And I will hand over to Victor now.
Thank you, Katie, for moderating today's Q&A. And of course, thank you, Eva, David, and Astrid for speaking on today's webinar. So we are, of course, aware that we probably haven't covered all the resources in antimicrobial R&D. So if you do know any that we haven't mentioned, please feel free to let us know at our email address, revive@gardp.org, or in this survey that will follow the webinar. So Astrid also mentioned that we'll be having our next webinar, which will be the first of the AMR discussion series. So we'll be very happy for you to join for us then on the 1st of July at 10 CEST. And the first topic will be balancing access to and stewardship of antimicrobials in LMICs. You can already register on the website for this webinar. So that will be all from us today. I would like to thank everybody for joining and for contributing to the discussion. I really hope you found the webinar useful and that you will join us again for future webinars. Please make sure to spread the word in your networks and to encourage your colleagues to join as well. Thank you and goodbye.